What's the significance of this summit? What are we expecting to come out of it?
Well, it is a really big deal. You heard him mention some of the statistics there about APEC. We're talking about 21 member economies, and it makes up, half of the world's trade and 40% of the global population. So what they decide in this room and at this conference has major implications. You heard him say, the decisions we make today will shape the direction we go for decades to come. He did speak a lot about the need to collaborate, saying things like the bridges that connect our people create a golden gate of opportunity. Also saying, look, we are a Pacific nation, and because of this, there's been peace and security in the region. That was interesting because of all the conflicts that we have right now. This is a critical moment, of course. First off, because of the Ukraine-Russia war, which continues. Russia is a member of APEC, and so a lawmaker was there from Russia. Also, the ongoing conflict in Israel between Israel and Hamas. That is another issue that's going to be crucial for collaboration. He didn't discuss that directly in the speech there, but we did see protesters over by the San Francisco Bridge this morning. So it's an issue that's top of mind for many. And then, of course, the discussion with President Xi, the first time they've met in over a year, talking about some of the big decisions that they made, restoring military to military communication, saying there, he got 2 applause lines there when he announced that military to military cooperation was the first time. And the second time was when he said a stable relationship is good for the world. So obviously, the crowd that was there really did want to see peace between these two world powers.
Let's talk a little bit about those protests in San Francisco. They're there in an attempt to shut APEC down. What sort of impact might these demonstrations have moving forward?
Well, here's the thing. We have 21 heads of state, 1,200 CEOs are there, so sort of pick your poison. There was a lot that people could protest about, and so there was sort of a collection of many different protests that were there. The umbrella group is the No to APEC coalition, and they were sort of scattered all throughout San Francisco. We mentioned the protesters that were over at the San Francisco Bridge protesting the Israel-Hamas war that's ongoing, many of them calling for a ceasefire. This is something that President Biden does need to pay attention to because he's also candidate Biden, and he has seen support among Arab Americans plummet, according to recent polling. So that's one issue. The protesters indicative of that issue President Biden will face. But also when it comes to China, there's a big political push to be tough on China. We've seen that on the Republican debate stages. President Biden has been tough on China in much of his rhetoric. And so it is a bit of a delicate dance that he needs to do where, yes, as President Biden, he wants to limit the possibility of conflict between these two world powers. But at the same time, he does need to appeal to the voters that want tough on China rhetoric. There's a recent survey that came out just this past week which found that 58% of Americans that were asked thought that it was a critical threat that China was becoming a world power. So, it's a lot to think about as candidate Biden as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the president touched quite a bit on labor standards, talking a bit about his global labor strategy. And we've heard he's pushing back hard on trade. Can you speak about the significance of that, especially because we are also listening to candidate Biden?
Right, trying to act as tough as he can to stand up for U.S. priorities while also trying to emphasize collaboration. One thing that I thought was really interesting is that there was a little bit of a domestic focus at the start of the speech. He was talking a lot about Bidenomics, saying things he says often about, building a middle-out economy, saying that for him, the trickle-down economy has not worked. As he said, it didn't land on his father's table right there. So he is trying to, of course, talk about the issues that are important to him when it comes to Bidenomics. He mentioned the UAW protests, those protests that just ended, the strikes that ended, saying that when labor does well, what does that do to all our non-label people around the country? He says everyone benefits.
Yeah, the president highlighting agreements reached with President Xi on fentanyl and military cooperation. We also learned today that there was discussions about more pandas to the U.S.
Look, this is a national story, but it's an even bigger local story. These pandas here in D.C. have been beloved, and just 8 days ago, they were sent home. They were sent back to China, much to the dismay of folks here in D.C. And now President Xi is signaling that China might be sending new pandas to the United States. Now, it's not necessarily good news for those of us here in the D.C. region, because the indication is that they could be going to Southern California, to San Diego perhaps. He called them envoys of friendship. Personal opinion, they're also very cute, these pandas. But basically, we've got panda diplomacy underway here between the U.S. and China.
Evan Koslof, thank you so much. That's all the time we have. Thank you for watching at home. I'm Erin Billups. More news right now on Spectrum News.